What is a healthy and biblical approach to helping a Christian leader or pastor who's struggling with sexual sin? Well, that phrase, struggling with sexual sin, can encompass a wide variety of things, so there's not a one-size-fit-all answer, but let's look at some biblical principles to remember. First of all, Christian leaders are not immune from sexual temptation and sin. The life of David, if nothing else, shows us that. But we know in our own lives that just because you have a walk with God doesn't mean that you don't have past sexual trauma or that you don't struggle with pornography or there might not be brokenness in your marriage. And so we have to enter into leadership and even leadership circles with the assumption that there are leaders and pastors who are struggling with these things. Often we just make the assumption that that's a spiritual man or woman and so they won't struggle. Well, that assumption isn't correct. So I think we want to provide opportunities and environments where there's accountability. And again, there's the assumption that these are common struggles for people to have. You also want to have resources available. I know Pure Desire, that ministry, as well as Emerge Counseling, one that's in my local area, has groups and counseling specific for Christian leaders and pastors who are struggling with things like this. And so make those things available before you hit a crisis of a big full-blown sin that's going to divide your congregation. I think these need to be conversations that all churches and Christian ministries have with the assumption, again, that we need to be discipled too, and we need to be held accountable, and we need resources for help. But another biblical principle is that Christian leaders and teachers are held to a higher standard. Now, why is that? It's because if a pastor or a Christian leader falls into significant sexual sin, it's going to harm the flock. It's going to harm the people. It's going to cause many people even to fall away from Christ because of their leadership role. And we've seen that happen in high-profile Christian leaders who've had falls because of sexual sin. And so when and if that happens, we need to recognize that there may be a time where that leader needs to be removed from leadership, or maybe on a sabbatical, or maybe reassigned to some other role. We need to take sexual sin very seriously, particularly as leaders, because of the impact it can have on the whole body and the whole church. But here's what we need to remember. God is a redemptive God. I mean, isn't it crazy the way that God treated David after this huge sexual sin and even murder that he committed? That God restored him to leadership and God redeemed his brokenness. I mean, we're still talking about him today. We're learning the lessons from his walk through sin and into forgiveness and redemption. So we really want Christian leaders to know that we don't just value them for their performance. We really love them as people. So when you're in the position of working with a leader who maybe has been removed from leadership, and that person is dealing with a lot of shame and a lot of consequences of what they're walking through, and you're seeing the fallout of that. But remember that God is a redemptive God, and you can be part of that redemption. Even if that person isn't in leadership anymore, they're still your brother or sister in Christ. And so be prayerful about creating opportunities and relationship for that individual to seek healing and restoration in Christ Jesus.